Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the MHP Show for another episode. This is where we talk about the good, the bad, the real, the unfiltered, the nasty, the crazy facts about owning and operating mobile home parks. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. And now we're going on to episode 3, guys. We've been having a lot of fun with this. And I appreciate you guys getting on. I've had people messaging me, hey, I love the show. I love the value you're giving on this. So it's pretty cool to see. And I think we'll continue to grow from this. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about something that I know a little bit about. The episode is going to be called The Problem with Value Add and Why It Is Actually Harder Than You Think. Because when you're getting in your first deal, you're probably not going to get into this 5-star stuff that's completely stabilized. You can, but really in the beginning, you're in capital multiplication mode. So you're looking for value add. And you're going to be able to get better deals buying value add and buying messy. And I think you have to do that at first because you need to learn, like I did in the first park that we bought. And I've talked about it. It was nasty. And so I was able to learn all the things that you need to learn to operate a mobile home park. And so now we've bought a couple stabilized deals and it's like, oh my gosh, this is golden. The problems in that are much less than if you're buying one of these value adds. So I want to get into this and talk about some things that you want to think about and some things that are going to be more difficult and some things that I actually underestimated the problems that can actually occur with buying a value add deal because there's a lot of them. Let's face it, there is a lot of them. A lot of these value add deals were built, seems like eons ago, and they're going to have problems. They're going to have infrastructure problems. There's all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk about that. So first off, what is a value add deal? So when I look at a value add deal in a mobile home park, it's a deal that has private utilities, typically. It's got a lot of park-owned homes, vacant park-owned homes that are in terrible shape. It's got vacant lots. It's in a rough neighborhood. The tenant base isn't that great. There's crime, there's drugs, there's all that stuff going on. The roads aren't paved. The manager's stealing from the owner. It happens a lot. Tenants paying cash. They don't have there's no technology involved in the business. Their books are on a sheet of paper. Their P&Ls on loose leaf paper. I know you guys have seen this stuff. So let's talk about this a little bit. So the first thing, when we're looking at these deals that are value add, is that they are going to have private utilities. Now, we've purchased some value add deals that actually were on public utilities, which is way better. But these private utilities include a wastewater treatment plant, a well, a septic system, a lagoon, which I don't have any experience with because I don't even think they have any of those in Florida. But those are the things, and those things can be tough and they can kill you because mom and pop have been bootstrapping these things for 30 years. What does that mean by bootstrapping? Is that, okay, when the pump goes out, they sort of rig it up to where it's fixed. They don't spend the $3,000 to $5,000 to replace the pump. The wastewater treatment plant, their operator told them that they needed $10,000 of work to bring the plant to where it's operable for an extended period of time, but no, they didn't want to do that. So they just bootstrapped it, which then created more problems. And so you're going to have this in these value add deals, and you're going to do inspections on these particular things. And I've got a fantastic due diligence list that I've built on these particular things, but you're going to miss stuff. And I know that because I miss stuff. And that's why I have 350 items on the due diligence list now because we miss stuff. And I would probably tell you in every single deal that we have been in, I don't think the seller or the broker or whoever was working with us on the acquisition, I don't think they ever disclosed any problems. They're like, oh, yeah. We just had a statement of conditions report done and blah, blah, blah. We just did, $5,000 worth of work and everything's fine. And so you're going to miss stuff. And even when you do stuff right, we have a park right now where we did everything right. I hired an engineer to come in and do a statement of conditions report to check all the flows on the treatment plant and check everything. And everything was seemingly fine. But of course, a month after we buy the freaking park, the flows are double what it's permitted for. And what do I mean by flows? So that's actually typically in states for a wastewater treatment plant, they're going to have a specific permitted amount of gallons of water that can come through the plant per day. So there's a meter on the plant and the water comes through and it measures it. And it's basically done by a calculation. And so in this particular property, we were permitted for, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10,000 a day or something like that. And we started running double. Of course, the flows have been fine for 4 years until we buy it. And so we're working through that now. And we've had this park for a year and a half or now or so. And there's more problems that we have uncovered with this system. And talking to the environmental protection guy, he's like, man, I knew a lot about this plant. Why didn't you call me? And I'm like, yeah, it's a good question. I thought the engineer was doing that. But guess what? It's on my due diligence list now to call and talk to multiple inspectors about these wastewater treatment plants because they can kill you. I think we're already 60 grand into some of the repairs now. We have to do another engineering report and turn it into these guys, and there may be more fixes. And so you can even do everything right. And maybe I missed, calling the agency and trusting that someone else would do that. But you're going to have to buy some of this nasty stuff to get really the returns you want in the beginning. So a wastewater treatment plant, you're going to have that. You're going to have a well system in a value add deal. Now, a well, to drill a new well, if you can do it right where your well stands, it's really not that bad. It can be about 50 grand. I think we paid 25 or 30 for one of our wells that went out. But, we have a well that went out in a property that we own in Tampa. And, well, it's not out yet, but it's going out. And you can't drill a new well because they have to be the setbacks. It has to be a certain amount of distance from the septic system that's there. And so we're connecting this park to city water and city sewer. But I was talking to a guy on the phone the other day, and he's like, yeah, we got a well there. And I'm like, okay, well, how old's the well? I don't know. I think he said like 40 years old or something. I'm like, dude, well, you need to check if you can even put a new well there. Because we couldn't even put a new well. If this well goes out in Tampa, we can't put a new well there because the setbacks don't allow for it. And so I told this guy, I'm like, dude, you need to call the health department or whoever does in that particular state and see, hey, can I drill a well here? What's the setbacks? Oh, I have septics too. Does it need to be a certain distance from the drain field? What are the new setbacks? Because I guarantee you they're crazier. And if the park was built in 1970, the setbacks and the regulations and stuff are not the same. So you can be like, well, I'll just drill a new well and for 40 or 50 grand, but you actually can't do that. So now you got to connect to city water. And if it's close, it's still going to be a couple $100,000, depending on how many units that you have. Or if it's far away, if you got a half a mile or a mile run to the tap, I mean, you're freaking screwed, dude. I mean, that's going to be, I don't know, $1 million. We purchased a property. It was in May of 2021. Extreme value add, had a wastewater plant and a well. Wastewater plant, the well was fine, but the wastewater plant had some issues, and they were thinking that we had to connect to the city, which was, I don't know, something to the effect of 3/4 of a mile or a mile away. And the quote that the prior owner got on that to do that work was like 1.7 million or something. So at that point, I don't even know what you do. If you get in a deal and you find out that happens and you can't do anything else, and then, you're screwed at that point. So like in getting to my point in these value add deals, like it's harder when you're dealing with these private utilities. I'm telling you, it is harder. You can make it work 100%, but it's not. Like you really have to understand the systems. You really have to understand the reports that come in from your operators every week. Because if you have a well in a wastewater treatment plant, your operators, there's going to be a guy operating it for you. And look, you don't have to be an expert on this stuff, but you really want to understand the system. What's going on with the system? What flows am I permitted for? What happens if we go over? Can you give me solutions to solve that? The chemicals and the bacterial reports that your well operator will give to you. Has it ever been, out of compliance in those areas. Because if it's been out of compliance before, maybe that was just an operator or the owner didn't want to do the work, or it could be a problem with the system. And so this is why it's my number one thing on the value add stuff, because you're gonna buy these private utilities. Now you don't have to. There's some people like, I don't want to buy private utilities. And look, the stuff that we've been dealing with over the past few weeks, I'm like, it has crossed my mind to say I'm never buying private utilities again. But then I just sent an offer in 2 days ago on a park that has freaking private utilities. I'm a glutton for pain, I guess. But also, with that being said, is that I've got the experience and I know how these systems work. So I am pretty confident that I can go in and get the data that I need, because in studying this stuff and learning about it, I know the 10 main things that you need to look for that can completely screw you over. And so I feel confident in that. And I'm going to basically account for that on the front end of the deal, because it's better to know about some of this stuff than not and going in. And then the last thing here on a septic system, look, when they work, they work. When they don't, they don't. And the problem with septic is that you typically don't know it's not working until you drive into the park and there's, 6 inches of sewage on the ground by one of your tanks or where the drain field is. So you don't know that. And even, and I hate to say this, but septic systems, tenants can get pissed off and screw them up as well. When we purchased I think it was like our second park that we purchased. Well, it was in the group of 4, but it was one of them. It was technically the second park that we purchased. So there was a guy living in the park, the old park manager, who was, stealing money, of course, par for the course. She got pissed off at him and didn't take his rent, and she was evicting him. And of course, we walked into this situation. So you know what this guy did? He started shoving anything and everything down the toilets, in the clean outs, anything and everything, and caused this massive backup, screwed up the drain field, called the health department. The health department was out there. They gave us a consent order. And I think we're actually having to replace that drain field now. It was just never that, we were never able to fix it correctly. And so you have to watch out for that stuff too. You have to watch out for the tenants doing these things to screw up your infrastructure, which can cost you a lot of money. So you kind of want to know some of these problems going in. And look, some of this stuff it's more difficult to find out. But my whole point in this is I just want you to be aware of that. So that's all I've got on utilities. I could talk forever about utilities and infrastructure, because that is your big, 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 big thing that can kill you. So the next thing a value add deal will have are park-owned homes. Now, I love park-owned homes. They could be new park-owned homes. They could be vacant park-owned homes. They could be total shit bombs of park-owned homes. They're going to be involved in a value add deal. Now, there's ways that you can get rid of them. Some people like park-owned homes. Some people don't. Some people think, okay, you should demo all of the crappy park-owned homes and bring in new homes. And you can do that. You can absolutely do that. But what we've done is we've actually sold the crappy park-owned homes, and we've been able to get a tenant to come in and actually fix that themselves. And we give them free lot rent while they're doing so. Or we've worked with some investors and Lonnie dealers where they come in and they can rehab that dilapidated park-owned home and bring it back online for you. And I would caution you from working with some of these guys that actually rent these things out versus selling them. Sometimes you can't prevent it. They say, oh, yeah, I'm going to sell it. And then they have someone renting. It's on rent to own, so they're kind of renting. But if you can find a trustworthy Lonnie dealer to come in and do this, and I mean, we don't care. We don't underwrite the cost, or we don't underwrite the value of the homes if we have park-owned homes in our underwriting, because it's just like extra for us. So we can sell these crappy homes for a couple $100, and it actually works out well for us. But it's not easy to do that. We've had success in doing that in some of these larger MSAs. But if you're buying a park in the middle of nowhere, it may be a little bit more difficult to do that. You're just not going to have the market. Like, we put what we call these is a handyman special. Our team will put one up on Facebook Marketplace. And dude, we get so many freaking, I mean, the inquiries that we get is crazy. But if you do that in a smaller market, in a sub market or a tertiary market, like you may not have as much demand for that. So I would just caution you with some of that, because you just want to make sure that you have the demand to do that. And now the problems you're going to run into with these vacant park-owned homes too. The first park that we bought, I was there every day chasing homeless people and freaking crackheads out of the vacant park-owned homes. I'm telling you, in these parks, if you've got vacancy, and depending on what part of town you're in, these things are just magnets for vagrants. It's like they just flock to where they know that the vacant homes are. And look, everybody needs a place to stay, but you ain't going to do it in my park. Okay, so we got to put an end to that. But you will have that. You will have that. Because most of these value add parks are probably not, if you're just talking about towns or cities in general, they're typically not in the greatest areas. And so you're going to have this. I've talked to numerous operators and they've had the same shit. You're going to have to do that and deal with that. So just be prepared for that. And I was not prepared for this in the beginning, because I'd listened to podcasts and things. Oh, yeah, mobile home parks is a passive investment. Sure it is. Yeah. We'll leave it at that. This was far from passive. Okay, and then vacant lots. So you're going to have vacant lots. Now, I've talked to people too that they're like, okay, well, I've got this park, it's 50 lots. There's 20 homes on it. We're going to come in and fill the 30 vacant lots. Now, have you thought about the cost of doing that? So for used homes, by the time you pay the mover, who is probably not that good, you pay him, depending on where it's going, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000, 12,000 if it's a long haul to bring that home in. So if you got to capitalize that in your deal, so 30 lots, let's just say by the time you buy the home, it's 30 to 35,000 per home. That's an extra $1 million. Bank's probably not going to finance that. Maybe you could get them to do it, but probably not. So it's not as easy as you think. You think you have this deal and you're like, oh my God, these vacant lots, I can bring homes in. Yeah, it sounds freaking great in theory. If you're doing new homes, I mean, it's probably double that. It's a couple $1 million to buy a new, maybe not, maybe 1.5 to do 30 homes, whatever. But regardless, it ain't cheap and it's not that easy. You have to make sure that the electric is good. Make sure the sewer and water lines are there. There's a lot of things. I could do a whole episode on the things you need to make sure that are in place when you're doing and looking to infill vacant lots. People do it all the time and you can do it. It's just not as easy. It's like, oh, we got vacant lots, we'll bring in homes. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of coordination that's involved. And in buying your first value add park, you're probably going to have to do most of this stuff on your own. And it's just, it's work and it's time consuming. So the other thing you're going to run into with a value add park is a rough neighborhood. Okay. Well, I've got a story for this one. So we bought some nasty stuff and turned it around. But we were actually looking at a park in Orlando, close to downtown Orlando. It's like, look, you're never going to be able to put this here again. But it was I know I talk about parks being a disaster, but this one was beyond that. It was in a part of town that you just could not turn around that neighborhood because the tenant base was so bad. The city, code enforcement, they know this place is bad, but they can't get rid of it because they know if they got rid of that park, all the 75 people, the 100 people that live in there would all be homeless. And it would have just been extremely difficult for us to turn that around. We wouldn't have been able to sell the homes. We would have had to operate it like the guy was operating it. He collected rent weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, semi-monthly, any way that you could pay rent, he was probably accepting it that way. And he had this sheet of paper in his office where he would just write down, and that's how his books were basically done on this old, I don't know, you'd know what I'm talking about if you saw it, but this old paper with the boxes on it and the lines. It was like a light greenish type paper. And he's tracking all of his shit on there. And I think someone ended up buying this park, and they're doing what I just said, the only way that you could run this park, exactly how the guy who purchased it, or exactly how the guy that the previous owners ran the park, because there's just no way that you can turn that around. It was all park-owned homes. There was like 94 of them, but it was only permitted for like 76. And they had massive septic issues. So like the 20 homes that weren't permitted were basically because the septic system failed. So the owners figured out a way to jerry rig all those other homes to other septics. So it was just a disaster. And this park was probably the most dense park I've ever been in my entire life. And it was a Florida special. We call Florida special when they're dense. These parks are dense. I don't remember the exact acreage on it, but there's 96 homes in there. And like you pulled in the straight down and there's side streets. So if you took a right on a side street, you would not be able to turn your car around. You would literally have to back out. And so if you lived in the back house and you drove down there and parked, and your Susie and Johnny, your neighbors, parked in behind you, you'd have to wait for Susie and Johnny to leave to get your freaking car out. It was a mess. It was a mess. And we've talked to a well-known broker and other people that know this park, and like, man, I've been through a lot of places, but this park, that was the only park I've been scared in. And if you look the park up on Google, actually the first images that come up are actually pictures of police lights and cars around the park. So it was nasty. But that is a perfect example. That was too much value add for even us to do. Like that neighborhood is just not going to be turned around anytime soon. Maybe in 15 or 20 years, there may be some gentrification there, but not anytime soon. So we passed on that one. But that's an example of a rough neighborhood. That was extremely rough, and you can have rough, but there's rough that you can actually turn around the neighborhood. If you have some half decent tenants in there, you can actually work to turn that around. But if the tenant base is too bad, it's just probably not going to work. Okay, next. So we're talking about unpaved roads. Okay, look, yeah, I mean, these value add parks, they have freaking craters inside, so you're going to have to pave the roads. But it may not be that easy as just going in and paving the road. Case in point. So we have a park that it was dirt roads. I think there was some, makeshift paving in certain places. So it's a dirt road. So we hire a contractor who's an idiot, by the way. That's a whole nother topic, and we will 100% do an episode on contractors. So this guy was an idiot. He went and paved. He didn't pull a permit. So one of the residents called code enforcement, which is like, okay, it's fine. You get an after the fact permit. Oh, no. And I didn't know this, but I do now. So because you're putting, I think, an impervious surface, which would be the asphalt. I think I could be saying that wrong. On the dirt, you're paving a dirt road essentially. You had to get a specific environmental permit. You had to go through all these other regulations and things. And so a year later, maybe it's been over a year now that we started the process to get this permit. We had to get a new topo survey, which was like 40 grand because this is a big property. So we paid the guy, I think 125 grand for the paving. Then on top of that, we had to get that topo survey, which was $40,000. And I told the guy we're not paying it. We ended up agreeing where we paid a little bit, but he paid for most of it because it was his screw up. And so and we had to hire a contracting company, a real contractor that'll do the work right, not like the one that did the paving, to come in and basically put these retention ponds in the park. And anyways, this whole project has been an extra $100,000 on top of the initial paving job that we did. And here's even more of the freaking catcher. There's one road in there we didn't even get to pave. And I believe we're going to end up finishing doing that. But I would just make sure, dude, if the road's already paved and there's just freaking moon craters in there, it's fine. You can probably do that. But just make sure you hire a good contractor to do that, because sometimes in a value add deal, it's just not as simple. Hey, we'll just go in and pave the roads and everything will be fine. So in the last thing here, there's going to be no technology in a value add deal. in a heavy value add deal, there's going to be no technology, meaning no one pays online. Everybody pays in cash. There's no communication. There's nothing. And you may say, Derek, oh, yeah, I'll just go in and make everybody pay online. No one's going to bring me cash. No one's going to bring me money orders. We have a lady at one of our parks that sends me a personal letter every month, and she sends a written check in there, and she sends me a one-page love letter every month. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not paying online, blah, blah, blah. And I think actually now, currently this month, I think she finally paid online. And this has been going on for 12, 18 months. No question about it. I get a love letter every month with a check in it because she refuses to use the online system. And it's just not as easy as you think. Oh, well, we'll just go in and add technology and everybody's going to start paying online immediately. Look, some of these people don't even know how to use a cell phone. I'm being honest. So it's more work than you think. And I think that's the point. The point of this show and me talking is that, look, I 100% recommend buying value add deals, but it's harder than you think. It's more work than you think. It's more effort than you think. It's more capital than you think. It's going to require more permitting than you think. And so just be prepared for that. And I'd love to help you do that. If you're underwriting a value add deal, shoot me a message. Hey, am I looking at this? Because the last thing you want to do is raise money for capital projects. Let's just say you budget because you want to get the deal done and budget, 150 grand in CapEx expenses, but it really should be 300. If you're bootstrapping in the beginning, you don't have that extra liquidity to cover this stuff. You're going to have to call up your investors and say, hey, dude, we need more money. And they're going to be like, screw you, dude. Like, it's just not an easy call to have. It's not an easy call to have. And so take a look at this stuff. And if you have questions on any of this, please just email me, Derek Vickers, 885@gmail.com or Derek@victoryrealestategroup.com. Find me on social media. I'm on every freaking platform. Trust me, I'm not hard to find. So I hope you got some value out of this. And so that is it for episode 3 of the MHP Show. Please subscribe and leave a comment on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Leave a comment. I'd love it. And, whether you like it or not, I don't care. Whether you like me or not, I don't care. So send a comment. I'd love to see the good and bad, or even, message me about some things that you'd like for me to talk about as well. If you have questions about specific things, because this is a very nuanced business, each park is different. Each park has its own characteristics. Just email me. I'd love to help you. So that's all we got, folks. Again, it's Derek Vickers, your host, signing out on episode 3 of the MHP Show podcast. See you soon.